Hello, everybody. My name is Sydney. I'm Sydney Winston. Guess what? I'm an atheist, a humanist, and a rationalist and a skeptic. But today we have an issue out in the oceans with. But today, with a submersible with tourists on and a pilot, looks like 5 people maximum, has lost contact with the world 4 kilometers down above the ocean floor, above the ocean. Um, 4 kilometers down below the ocean. Let me get this straight here. And I'm thinking that this is something that really could go wrong, or has already gone wrong in a big way. But if it hasn't gone wrong, and if there's going to be a decent and hopeful outcome from this, then I think it would be really nice to be part of that, because we need some feel good. I don't know if this is going to be a feel good ending, but it's kind of all we got. Let's see. Okay, let me just grab hold of this. There we go. All right, so the BBC, we'll be watching the BBC. We're also going to be watching the CBC and also NPR, and see if there's any updates from there. But I want to start off with the BBC, because they have a live missing Titanic. So at this point, there's less than 40 hours of air left. As you can see, what's this?
OceanGate Expeditions says it's getting help from government agencies and deep-sea companies, and it's praying for the crew's safe return. Jessica Parker, BBC News in Boston.
Well, this is what the Titan submersible looks like. It's really small, less than 7 meters long, about the size of a transit van, and that makes it even harder to find. It has sensors all across its hull, which are supposed to give early warning of any ruptures and leaks. And it can descend down to 3,800 meters where the Titanic lies. But at that depth, even if it's spotted, most rescue vessels wouldn't be able to reach it. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning reports now on the people who are trapped inside.
British businessman Shahzada Dawood was on a father and son trip with 19-year-old Suleiman. The Dawood family have asked people to pray for their safety.
Science and technology can also bring about higher productivity.
Mr. Dawood, seen here speaking at the UN, is also a prominent supporter of the Prince's Trust. Tonight, Buckingham Palace said the King's thoughts and prayers are with him and the others missing, and His Majesty has asked to be kept up to date with the search efforts. Friends say Mr. Dawood had been looking forward to the Titanic trip.
He had the enthusiastic, outlook of a young child. Really, he was so excited about this opportunity, and he mentioned it with the biggest smile possible on his face in telling me about it. So we were all very excited for him and happy for him that he was able to have this extraordinary opportunity.
Hamish Harding is a well-known explorer and adventurer. His last pictures show the start of this Titanic trip. Those who know him say he will be using his experience to stay calm in these extreme circumstances.
He's a very charming guy, very adventurous, very professional about way he goes about things, but he does these extreme adventures, and this was the latest one.
Paul-Henri Nargelet, a former French Navy diver, is another of the passengers on the submersible.
He's very well known in Titanic community. He has probably there may be only 1 or 2 people that have more dives onto the wreck than he does, and so he understands what it looks like on the seabed and provides that service as an expert guide.
So it must be very stressful for you to know a couple of the people on board.
Yeah, it brings it home personally. That's the difference. This also happens to be my field, search and recovery, but when it's involving with people that you know personally, it's the impact is bigger.
It's been confirmed that Stockton Rush, the CEO of the firm behind the Titanic mission, is also on board. Families and friends from Britain, Pakistan, the US and France, knowing that the next few hours are crucial for those lost at sea. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
Well, Jessica Parker is in Boston, from where the rescue operation is being coordinated, and Nomia Iqbal is in Newfoundland. That's where the ship left from on Sunday. And Nomia, first of all, what are the conditions like out there at sea while they're trying to look for this sub?
The teams are working in really terrible conditions. This is the worst spring since 1943 here in Newfoundland, according to officials. The visibility is so low, but the teams are still working to try and, in that desperate race against time, to try and locate the Submersible. Just to sort of emphasise again the scale of this, so the Titanic wreckage is about 400 miles off the coast from where I am, and the area that they're searching is 70 miles wide, so that's about the size of the state of Connecticut. And expert divers will tell you that the depth of the ocean is that depth of the ocean is less explored than outer space. Now, earlier I spoke to the Premier of Newfoundland, Andrew Fury, and he said to me that the province is used to maritime tragedies, given its location, given its history, given its relationship to the Titanic. But this is really unfathomable for the locals. And he said to me, look, we feel helpless but not hopeless. And he is saying that the province will do whatever it takes to try and find the missing 5.
And Jessica, they have no idea where it is. It could be bobbing on the surface, it could be on the seabed, but whatever happens, they are literally bolted inside this sub, aren't they? And the oxygen is running out.
Yeah, we had that crucial detail from the US Coast Guard earlier that they estimate there's now less than 40 hours of breathable air left on that sub. So they're working with an added sense of urgency, they say, around the clock. An unmanned vehicle has been making dives in the ocean where the sub was last seen. Further vessels are headed to the area as well. This operation now involves the private sector and the military as well. Now remember, of course, there is the aerial search going on, as you say, looking at the surface of the water in case the vessel has re-emerged. And they're using sonar technology to listen deep underwater. Now, I asked the US Coast Guard earlier if they had heard anything that they thought might be the vessel. They told me no. I also asked, given they haven't yet been able to locate the sub, is a deep sea rescue mission now even possible? They said they've got to keep trying.
Jessica, Nomia, thank you both.
You're watching a special BBC News live stream. We're bringing you coverage.
Well, hello everybody. I am on camera now. Big fucking deal. Anyway, I gotta center stuff. No, I wasn't on camera. Hold on a minute. I'm running low on Wheaties. Just give me a second here. There we go. That should have done it. There we go. Okay, good. So I got something to say. I got something to throw out there. What do you think? Do you guys remember that a few years ago there was a Malaysian airliner that flew out to the south of this planet and was lost and never seen again, hasn't been found. It's probably been about 4 or 5 years by now that it hasn't been found. And do you remember that the big speculation of what the cause of all this was. Pilot suicide. The pilot had planned to evade everything and end the plane's life, his life, and everybody aboard it at the discretion of the size of the fuel tanks. Once the fuel ran out, plane crashed, everybody gone. Suicide. That's a speculation. Now, I was wondering if in this particular case, with the CEO on board, if there isn't something more sinister than a mere maybe mechanical malfunction or something. Is it sabotage? Is it a suicide mission by the CEO? I'm just throwing it out there. Let's go back and listen to what these guys are going to say.
Reaching the bottom of the ocean.
When you touch bottom, you don't really know where you are. And again, the compass immediately stopped working and was just spinning around. And so we had to flail around blindly at the bottom of the ocean, knowing the Titanic was somewhere there, but it is so pitch dark.
In the sea's murkiest reaches, this is what people pay nearly £200,000 to see. OceanGate Expeditions says it's getting help from government aid.
So each person paid £200,000. So there's 4 passengers at £200,000. Oh, let's make it 250,000 US dollars. So that's $1 million that they get for each submersible tour of adventure. So some of these people we can definitely conclude that at least some of the 5 people aboard are not a party to the suicide pact, if there is one, in which case they know that their time is running out with the oxygen. Now 40 hours, if 40 hours is less than 2 days, so Western Canada time right now is sort of mid-afternoon on Tuesday. 40 hours would give them until Thursday morning, maybe, not even. So this could be huge. This could be a huge blow to the safety of adventure tourism. Now, apparently the guy who's the CEO, he has also gone to space, on a, I'm not sure exactly. I think it was on Jeff Bezos's, or Virgin's little sort of space flight like Stephen Hawking's went on. I'm not sure. But now he's down there, and I'm squarely, right at this point, focusing on suspect number 1, and that is the CEO of, what's it called? That out. Oh, I forget. Actually, no, I don't forget. Hold on a second. They're OceanGate. That's what it's called. OceanGate. CEO of OceanGate. Is he around? Is he not around? Well, let's listen in. I mean, this is the latest we got.
Assumed the responsibility of search and rescue mission coordinator and immediately launched search assets. Since Sunday, the Coast Guard has coordinated search efforts with the U.S. and Canadian Coast Guard, Air National Guard aircraft, and the Polar Prince, which have searched a combined 7,600 square miles, an area larger than the state of Connecticut. These search efforts have focused on both surface, with C-1...
Did you guys notice earlier on when somebody mentioned that people were praying them twice? Two sets of prayers were being said for the people on the submersible. What a waste of time, of energy to say shit like that. Oh, we're praying that they'll be found. Prayers are useless.
Capability. They have rendezvoused with the vessel Polar Prince and commenced an ROV dive at the last known of the position of the Titan and the approximate position of the Titanic wreck. That operation is currently ongoing. Additionally, a Canadian P-3 aircraft is currently conducting a 6-hour search of the area, and several C-130 aircraft and another P-3 are scheduled to fly this afternoon.
What I want to know is what kind of precautions do the people up on the boat on the surface have in terms of keeping tabs, in terms of in terms of a fallback plan if something went wrong. A contingency plan is the word I was looking for if things go wrong. Why isn't the ship that's the mothership of this submersible? Doesn't it have more equipment and a plan ready for saving this thing? Why are why are we relying on Boston to send out ships? Are there any ships in the area right now besides that plane? I don't know. Let's see if we can find out.
Different capabilities. It's our understanding the current ROV that is deployed at the site now has some limited capability, has a camera on board, but again, each of those is different, and we'll be gathering more information as that operation goes on through the day.
Captain, how many hours of NBC News. If your submersibles can find this sub, is there any way to retrieve it and save the people on board?
Yeah, so right now all of our efforts are focused on finding the sub. What I will tell you is we have a group of our nation's best experts in the Unified Command, and if we get to that point, those experts will be looking at what the next course of action is.
Captain,
how many hours of oxygen are left that you know of that you can estimate right now on the submersible? And does it have to be approved or regulated?
Sure. So first of all, it's an estimate, right? Because we know from the data we were using as a starting point was 96 hours. We know at this point we're approximately about 41 hours.
41 hours left.
Yes.
And does it have to be approved or regulated? Is submersible, does it go through anything that you know of?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact technical piece of that. We know there's about 40 hours of breathable air left based on that initial report. Again, that was just the initial report based on 96 hours from when the vessel.
Captain, even with that amount of time that's left, let's say 41 hours or so, if you were to find the submersible at this moment, would that give you enough time to save these 5 people on board?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. What I will tell you is we will do everything in our power to effect a rescue.
Okay, I just did the math here. 41, and I'm giving the benefit of the doubt here. You know, the most sort of conservative estimate here. 41 hours left of air is 1.7 days. So tomorrow this time will be at 0.7 of a day. And 0.7 of a day. All right. How do you work this stupid calculator? Doesn't. There we go. So 0.7 of a day. Hold on a second. Let's get days, 2 hours. So 0.7 0.7 of a day is still 16 or nearly 17 hours from now. So a day plus, so they've got almost 2 days. If there's so many things that could have gone wrong, crash. I mean, the communication just stopped. Bang. It got cut. And I'm surprised there's no contingency hanging around for something like this, because the guys, they go 4 kilometers down into the ocean. According to, let's see if I can find that thing. There we go. Oh, there it is. Yes. There we go. So, so according to this chart here on the right, just how deep underwater could the Titan sub be? Well, according to this chart, 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer below the surface of the water is when sunlight stops penetrating any further. Sunlight penetrates up to 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer down. The wreck is 3,800 to 4,000 meters down. Darkness, look how far away relatively it is from the top of the top. This is an incredibly daunting task for these people.
And searching as hard as we can and getting the assets out there as quickly as we can.
And so the private companies with other assets that are rushing to the area, what sort of assets do they have? Do they have ROVs? They have some technology that we may.
Yeah, so there are some additional assets with ROVs. There is one asset they made that is working to get on scene with a decompression chamber. So those are all pieces that are coming together, and we're working those logistical challenges to get them there. And I think we'll take one more.
Is a deep sea rescue realistic?
Well, I can't tell you exactly what it would look like. I would tell you that we are out there, we're searching. We wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be searching and putting all effort out there. I think that, if the sub is located.
Okay, so I am following.
Then the experts need to look at.
I am following the chat. Ooh, it's not looking too big, is it? Okay, it's Quinn Albrecht. 6 a.m. Eastern Thursday would be 41 hours from the press conference. 6 a.m. Thursday. Which would be 3 a.m. Thursday for me. And it's now Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. So wow. You can't. All sports fan Adam says, I can't believe a submersible that charges $195,000 for a seat to see the Titanic uses a modified SNES gaming controller. Sounds like experts of these boats wrote to the company expressing design concern too. I agree. I did read articles that there were problems with the actual design of it. It's kind of been thrown together, not very. There aren't any very high standards that are actually being adhered to in the production of this thing. But this dude's still talking. Let's listen in some more.
Yeah. That's so. Our aircraft, the C-130 aircraft, they're based out of there as well. So I know there is a number of pieces going out there. Logistically, it's easier as opposed to here. I don't know an answer to that. So I know a lot of those questions were unanswered on there, and it's a lot of it's because we're not the right agency to be asking that. I know as a McMahon, we should be to be the one to give the answer to you, but we want you guys to hear it from the subject matter experts. So that's our next plan. Is what we want to do is give an opportunity for you all to get all of the subject matter experts we can into one location to kind of get those questions answered. To give you kind of the best thing we can do. Yeah.
40 hours, when that becomes a recovery mission, you choose to do a recovery mission.
I'm sorry?
When those 40 hours are up, dedicated for the estimate, is that the moment you shift from a search and rescue to a recovery operation, if you choose to do a recovery operation?
I think it really depends on a number of factors. So anything that could change between now and then, as far as information response, things like that could change that. So it's not a hard and fast, timer's up, time to transition. There's a lot of factors that go into it that could extend.
What role does the amount of oxygen play in one of those factors? And with 40 hours of oxygen left, when would you then transition from a search and rescue to a search and recovery?
I don't know an answer to that. That's definitely outside, but we can try to get back to as we transition through that phrase. We'll have better answers for that.
Is there information about the conditions out there? Like what exactly are the Coast Guard facing?
So the weather-wise, yep. So actually, I have, I believe the weather on scene today was 5 to 6 foot seas.
What does that mean? Sorry, about the wave?
So wave height, 5 to 6 feet. I believe it was 15 knot winds. Visibility was very foggy yesterday with very little nose visibility, but was increasing today, and they were expecting much better conditions from an aerial search perspective.
So it's like very waves today, and it's cleared in terms of visibility. High winds persist, or?
It was 15 knot winds. So in terms, it's about average out there, right?
Okay. Videos and photos and stuff like that from your operation. Is there a specific reason why you haven't from this operation?
We just haven't received any yet at this point.
And you don't expect to?
We do expect to get some. Like I said, we do have some graphics that we're trying to look to send out this afternoon, as well as we've reached out to the aircraft crews to get footage from them. Now I know with the ROVs that are on scene today, like I said, there hasn't been any before, so we are requesting out there to try and see what we can get to go through that and try to make that available to you all.
Is there even images from the command center?
I don't have an I don't know. I don't have an answer to
Coast Guard
that.
does not have any assets to get it right now.
The Coast Guard assets itself, no, we do not have any Coast Guard covers on
Any of the other ones.
No, so the reason
You know what's
why
going to be weird
capabilities are right now.
is as we follow this along, it says less than 40 hours of oxygen left. Well, in 20 hours, it's going to say less than 20 hours, 10, and it's the countdown. This is a 40-hour countdown to us knowing, to us knowing for sure 100% that these people have been rescued or that they've perished. And if they rescued, jubilation all the way around, blah, 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 lovely. But if they are not rescued, then I'm gonna be, stressed, and I'm gonna be, anxiety is going to build up when I think about how slowly these people will have died. Oh man, that's gonna. I'm preparing myself for that. Iris K. Hi, am I live? Yeah, this is live. You betcha. And this is live from the BBC right now.
In the past on other expeditions, has the Coast Guard ever been involved with them?
That's
And did
my
they?
knowledge.
But OceanGate is cooperating with the investigation.
Absolutely. They're part of the Unified Command here, so we're all making decisions together.
So did they have anything else that could go down? 13,000.
I don't know, but if they do, it's definitely being discussed as far as their capabilities.
Wait, they tell you if they did? I mean, so it doesn't sound that like it sounds like the nearest vessel that it's not clear how long it takes to get a vessel there.
That's the biggest part of the challenge of all of this, is trying to understand how the capabilities are working together, how they would do it, the technical aspect of that.
So if you're a family member or someone on board, would you invest in for the family?
I think it was clearly they would have better.
Could we ask you, could you just describe, the crushed depth here? We're talking about 400 times, as I understand it, what we all experience at sea level. What can that do to a vessel?
I can't speak to the scientific side of that.
Yes, you can, liar.
Background information for you guys.
Come on, this guy's just trying to back out of some responsibility for anything.
Submersible doesn't necessarily.
They're starting to ask the hard questions. The journalists.
And that would be a great question that we could try to get answered for you with that subject matter expert discussion that we talked about, for them to get an opportunity for you guys to ask that question, because it'd be much more important and realistic for somebody within that community part of the command that would be able to answer that question a lot clearer than anything I would do.
Okay, I must.
When might you provide your next update?
Turn this.
So we do have a press release that's going to be going out shortly with the graphics we talked about. Probably similar information to what was passed today.
Okay, I just want to read. Let's read. Okay. Iris, nice. I personally am still searching how I feel about this very unique situation. Notice many people seem to harbor some bad feelings about the whole billionaires doing meaningless things stuff, but I'm like, they are human regardless. So yeah, complicated. Big boys have big toys, and if the big toys if something happens to the big toys and something goes wrong, well, that's not so good, is it? All sports fan, what do you say? There's even a high chance cabin fever would set in. Cabin fever. I mean, you hear all these space experiments in confined spaces where the crew goes crazy with panic. And that's the best case scenario. Still alive. Oh, can you imagine in this little confined space? and you're there with 5 people and some little, apparently there's a little toilet in there somehow with a curtain that can, oh, for fuck's sake. What do you say, Iris? Well, 2 of the people there seem to be used to it. If they are still alive, they will calm down those that are not used to it. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. At least they try. Still this far in, chances are thin, honestly. But let's hope yeah, exactly. Like, you know, all this hoping and praying and thoughts and la la la, it's just delaying the inevitable. Find the fucking thing. Sports. Adam. A whistleblower got fired from the company in 2018 after raising concerns about the carbon fiber hull. He was fired by Stockton Rush himself, the CEO on the sub. Oh my God, this is becoming, you can't write this type of story. No problem about the typos. That's life. Adam, what do you say? Still Irish? I think it is a unique situation. I feel bad if they die and it's prolonged and slow, helpless. Oh, what's going on here?
Carrying 5 people who were on an expedition very, very deep in the North Atlantic to see the remains of the Titanic, which sank in 1912. And it's fair to say this is a story that has just captured the attention and the imagination of the entire world since it started early hours of Sunday night into Monday morning. Right, joining me in the studio is somebody who's actually been on the Submersible that we're talking about. It's Simon Platts, who made a BBC programme that featured it a few years ago. Hi, Simon.
Hello.
I'm glad you got your notepad with all your notes and reflections, because we'll be mining that in a minute. Also joining us down the line is David Russell. He led the UK effort to help rescue survivors of the Russian submarine, the Kursk, which sank in the Barents Sea in the year 2000. Hi, David.
Hi.
And we're also going to be joined by one of our colleagues from Canadian Broadcasting, who is at the scene where the rescue effort's been launched from in Newfoundland in Canada. She's just getting ready, and we will go to her when everything is hunky-dory. First of all, David, anytime I've been on a submarine as a tourist, like a World War II relic or something like that, you have felt claustrophobic. The idea of being in a submarine surrounded by all that water, there is something very just powerful about that idea, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And I think that's what captures people's imaginations when we have incidents like this, because like you, people may have seen pictures or movies or even been on a submarine. And therefore it's quite a visceral feeling to it, I think, for people who can just imagine what it's like for those who are on board the submersible.
Right, let's catch up with Heather Gillis from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Hi, Heather.
Hello.
Do you want to just paint a picture of where you are at the moment and just how much kind of buzz there is around there?
Well, I'm in our newsroom right now, but the buzz is just like unlike anything I have seen in my career. The international attention that this story is capturing is definitely intense. I understand a crew from the BBC is here in Newfoundland and Labrador this morning in Canada. And, the New York Times, the Washington Post, every major news outlet is covering this story. There's so much fascination surrounding the Titanic in the first place. And with this missing sub now, it has just intensified further. So what I can tell you right now from our reporting so far this morning, that the U.S. Coast Guard did search into the night. They haven't found anything at this point, and they will be expanding and intensifying that search this morning.
And that's the latest as we're recording this episode of Newscast at 2:30 UK time on Tuesday afternoon. Simon, first of all, just tell us about the company that organises these trips and the actual vessel that they use and that we're talking about.
So it's organised by a company called OceanGate, and they run this expedition once a year. And I think they're out there for about 7 weeks. And they go out to the site of the Titanic for about 8 days at a time, and then they go back to Newfoundland, get a new set of passengers, keep the same crew, and then go out again, and then come back and go out again for the space of about 7 weeks, as I say.
at quite a lot of cost to the passengers. This is a rich person's holiday.
Yeah, so it's I think it was about $250,000 was the cost for it. Yeah.
And what's the actual vessel like itself?
Well, the submersible is a very small thing. So it's like a kind of little tin can, basically, the size of probably, I don't know, a few refrigerators, really. And there's very little inside the submersible. It's basically just a metal sheet with one button which they press to switch everything on, a few screens which they use to kind of navigate using the cameras outside, and there's a window at the front as well. And they've just got a little kind of they call it a kind of PlayStation remote control, effectively, to navigate their way on the ocean floor. So it's simplistic in terms of there not being much in there, but I'm sure there's a lot of technology behind it.
Yeah, and that clip, which was also shown by CBS, the American broadcasters, of the games console that they use to control it, that's gone kind of mega viral. David, as an observer of this technology, as an outside observer to me, this seems like a very kind of simplistic setup they've got there. Is that me just being a bit superficial, and actually just how it looks is nothing to do with how safe or sophisticated it actually is as a bit of marine kit?
Yeah, I think anything you take down to the depths they go to, 4,000 meters, is going to be very, very complex behind the scenes. So I think the technology makes it look simple. But there's got to be quite a bit of clever software to be able to navigate the submersible around the ocean. And I mean, that is a real strength. I mean, the technology since 2000, and Kursk was saying, has really moved on. But that's also a bit of a weakness, because if you have an electrical supply failure, whereas in the submarines that I used to go to sea in, we could do everything 3 different ways, and if necessary, do it by hand in the end. Doesn't sound like they've got those different fallback mechanisms.
Right. So normally you'd expect quite a lot of resilience and redundancy built in, and you suspect that might not be the case here. Simon, just how did it feel on a personal level when you were in that small metal tube? Could you picture yourself what it would be like thousands and thousands of meters under the sea?
Yeah, I'm sure it's very cramped, especially when there's 5 people in there and it gets very hot. Just when I was in there setting up cameras, there's sort of sweat dripping from the ceilings. It gets quite moist in there. So yeah, I'm sure it's a very cramped environment.
I'm sure it's a cramped environment.
Did it feel like it was a substantial piece of kit? Like, would you have felt safe going that deep in it?
Yeah, it's.
You don't want to put yourself in the story. I realize that, but I mean, simple things like, did it feel like the metal was really, really thick, and you'd be confident it would survive all that pressure? We know it does survive that pressure. I'm just trying to get at the psychological thing.
Well, I couldn't say, but it's Stockton, the CEO of the company, made it clear throughout that there's kind of no guarantees that you're going to get down. There's no guarantees you're going to get to the wreck. It's a very dangerous environment, and very few people have been down there. And they very openly say this is very innovative technology. They're working at the limits of what's possible. I think it's the first submersible that can take 5 people down to those kind of depths. So everyone there was very aware of what they're operating with. But that being said, they're very open as well, and they gave everyone a tour of the submersible, and they explained some of those fail safes. So, for example, I think one of them is that after a certain amount of time underwater, if for example they can't get back, they can't sort of release the weights which are attached to the submersible, which help it go back up to the surface. Those should dissolve after a certain amount of time. So in that case, then they should always be able to get back up to the surface. But who knows what's happened in this case?
Heather, what do we know about the actual scale of this rescue operation and some of the things that are being used?
Well, it's massive. The U.S. Coast Guard is involved, along with OceanGate. They have been leading the search. The Canadian Coast Guard on our end is also involved. They have at least one ship sent out to that region. I'm waiting for an update from the Coast Guard. The Canadian Air Forces has an airplane. There are local support vessels as well that have departed St. John's Harbor. And we were speaking to one company locally here just not too long ago that said that they have some underwater capability that is headed out to that area. So from my understanding from Rear Admiral John Mauger, who's with the U.S. Coast Guard, said they flew an area offshore last night, which was the size of the state of Connecticut, which for context is about 13,000 kilometers squared. So it's a massive area that they flew and did a search last night. So today, again, that search going to be going underwater to see if they can find the submarine. And they say OceanGate is also involved because they know the sub, they know its capability, they know the area that they were trying to go down to. So they're involved there as well.
And how are they actually updating you? Are they doing kind of regular news conferences? Because I imagine, as well, you even said, there was just so much demand from the media for information in real time.
So much demand. The U.S. Coast Guard did a press conference, a news conference last evening. We have reached out to them again. We have not been getting regular updates. Otherwise, they probably are just overwhelmed with the amount of media requests that they're getting. It's just the buzz unreal. Like St. John's is a pretty sleepy town with about 100,000 people. So, the spotlight is really on this place over the past couple of days. And then there's a complicating factor with that sub. The people who are inside are basically bolted in there. And according to OceanGate's website, they had 96 hours of life support of oxygen on board. So the clock is really ticking now. We're into day 2 if they do have a 4-day supply.
Yeah, because they lost contact with the mothership, as it was, about an hour and 45 minutes after they'd started to submerge on Sunday, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. That's correct.
It feels incredibly grim to try and make a calculation of about how many hours of oxygen they have left. And also, David, I imagine is that necessarily a sensible way of even looking at this?
I agree on that. I agree.
Irrespective of kind of the moral kind of implications of counting that down.
Well, I think it's a very practical implication because you've just got to have some idea of the time frame. When we did the Kursk operation, we didn't know any of that because we had no idea of the conditions on board. Here, where we know there are 5 people, we know how big it is, we know they've got oxygen supplies apparently for 96 or 90 hours. So those are useful things, but the most important thing, of course, it gives you a time frame within which to conduct research. So I was looking at from what people were saying, this thing travels at 3 knots, 3 miles an hour. And if it was 2 hours after, let's say, 2 hours after it was launched that it stopped, the search area is, in theory, just 6 miles, circle radius 6 miles. But that's about 120 square miles. And if it's on the ocean floor, it's a very tiny object to find. So that's the problem that the search rescue forces have.
Okay, so actually you've got to combine the area. And yeah, I'm now doing my old GCSE maths of working out how you calculate an area. And then you've got to then multiply that by the depth as well. Yeah. Also, David, I've read lots of stuff about how the debris from the Titanic, it's like if you watch the film Titanic, you think it's sunk in 2 big chunks and that's what's down there. That's actually not the case, is it? The ocean bed is not that neat.
No, it's never that neat. I mean, any vessel that sinks usually breaks up into pieces that are scattered over several miles. So which won't actually help because we're looking for an object which is about 6-7 meters long. There may be lots of those kind of metal objects, and sonar is very good, but it will take a side scan type sonar with really accurate sonar pictures quite some time to sort out which are the contacts you're interested in and which are not. So, yeah, it could be, it is a difficult task.
I think we're all quite aware of what's so...
I haven't heard a positive note out of anyone. I think they're talking in a way as to soften the blow when at the very end of all this, it's the worst news possible. because that's sort of where it's turning. However, on the bright side, never say never. You never know, right? At least right now, when they got a day and a half of oxygen. I can't speak for what's going on in the actual sub. I mean, they might have all succumbed already to lack of oxygen. Maybe there was a leak. Maybe they lost power. Maybe the thing is just floating on the whim of the current under there. Might not even be near anymore if it's lost power and it's just. Imagine this. There's two people out on a spacewalk, like we saw last week on the International Space Station. Somehow one of them becomes untethered and starts to float off. Now the amount of oxygen that they've got in the back is determining how long they're going to be living. But however long that is, they're going to be able to think about the fact that they're floating through space and they're going to die as soon as the oxygen runs out. It's got to be the worst position in the world to be in. Way under the ocean, and you've got no way to survive without air, and when an air runs out, you're gone. And up in space, the same thing. All you've got is your air strapped to your back, and when that's gone, you're gone. Look. Yeah, I'm sorry about the sound. I turned it off while I was talking.
What has happened, and then what they could do as a result?
No speculation yet. I think everyone is still focused on the search and rescue mission, and that's a sense that we got from the Rear Admiral just a couple of hours.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Jay, welcome Ruo, and welcome Jay. Water or food? Is there any at all on them? Would there be any space for them for water or food? Surely a little bit of water. I wonder. Let's listen in.
Do unfortunately cover tragedy on the ocean, and what happens when there is a search and rescue mission. From my experience covering some disasters here in the province, it's always about the search first. They search and then hopefully rescue people. And, after a number of hours, often, 48, 72 hours, things are called off. Obviously, we have more time in this case with that 96 hours or 4 days worth of life support on board that vessel. But no one has made any theories about what has happened. Still not enough information at this point.
And Heather, we should remember that at the heart of this is the fate of the 5 people who are on board. What have we learned about who they are?
We have confirmed the identity of 3 people who are on board. First, we had confirmation this morning that Hamish Harding was a part of the expedition. He's a 58-year-old British national. He's a businessman, and we did get a news release from Action Aviation confirming that he is currently on board the Titan and was on the way to visit the Titanic. We have also heard that Shahzada and Suleiman Dawood, a father and son originally from Pakistan, but now living in Surrey in the UK, were also involved. It's being widely reported, but we have not yet confirmed ourselves here at CBC News that Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, was also on board, and the identity of the 4th person has not yet been confirmed.
Yeah, although my colleagues in the BBC Paris bureau are pretty confident that it's Paul-Henri Nargeolet, who's a former French Navy diver who's actually explored the Titanic before. Simon, did you meet Stockton Rush when you were doing your filming?
I did, and PH as well, who you mentioned, right? Who's dived on the Titanic. I think.
Was he known by his initials?
He is, yeah,
right.
yeah, and he's dived. It's almost the most out of anybody who's been down to the wreck. So he's a very experienced diver. So it's very sad to hear that he's on board.
What kind of strikes me about that list of people on board is you would normally, like, if this was a disaster film, you'd think they'd be quite wealthy people, like some tech millionaires or something in there for the drama. Actually, these seem like people who have got a sort of professional or
I agree with Tabs King. That must be the worst feeling, thinking about that. I mean, look at us here. I'm a little anxious myself. I'm suffering from a little anxiety from just imagining what these guys are going on, what's going on down there. But I couldn't imagine being in a situation like that. I don't know how I would handle it. I kind of think that I would try and remain calm all the way through, knowing that panicking and losing it just doesn't really do anything other than use up more oxygen. This is probably one of the worst dilemmas, current event, as it happens, dilemmas that I've ever witnessed. This.
We talked about Hamish Harding, who's had a career as an explorer. We've had a voice note from one of his very good friends, Patrick Woodhead, who organises expeditions to the Antarctic.
Hi, Adam. Hamish had an extraordinary love of aviation and exploration and combined the two very well. He was part of our first ever flight with the Gulfstream into Wolfsfang runway in Antarctica, which is an ice runway. And he was very much part of pioneering how we were going to do it, what plane we were using. And being a Gulfstream pilot himself, he had such incredible knowledge. But really about how...
It seems like they're talking in the past tense about these people. Hamish, I know, is one of them. Is one of the people they said was on board the submersible, and now they're talking in the past tense about him. Weird. And the saddest thing about all of this is that tonight, while those people are struggling to live on the submersible that is hot, that is got no food, probably very little water, we will be going to bed in our warm beds and sleeping peacefully until we wake up in the morning and resume this story, unless we stay up all the way through. I don't know quite how this is going to play out, because you never know what news could break at any second. In fact, this guy might be breaking news right now.
Their lives, they were doing something which they'd really, obviously, desperately keen to do, and it's a great adventure. But yeah, I don't think they would feel themselves to be necessarily different. Submariners who do it for a day job every day of the week, well, we do have a different idea and a different approach to the risks, because we know what the risks are. We operate the submarines. We know it's as safe as we make it. We're in charge of our own destiny, and they would have been a little bit as passengers, so to speak, on board this submersible. But they obviously have a great sense of adventure, and that's what drove them to do this.
Simon, you mentioned earlier on that when you did your filming with OceanGate, they talked about the weights that would detach and dissolve after a certain period. Did you have any other conversations with them about the worst case scenarios?
They clearly had lots of things that they could do in the event that things went wrong, but I couldn't say specifically, what they were if it was an absolutely catastrophic thing. When we were there, one thing did go wrong. So they once they got down to the bottom of the ocean, this sort of PlayStation remote control, which we were talking about earlier, went wrong. And they at that point had descended for 2 hours to get down to the bottom of the ocean. They just free fall down to the bottom of the ocean. And
all right, so now this is all very, very, it's getting to me. So I just want to take a moment to show you two dogs sitting on the lying on the couch. Two big dogs, puppies. One's a black lab, and the one at the end there is a white. The white-looking one is some kind of a doodle, like a poodle doodle or something. They are my guests for a few days, and as you can tell, I've run them ragged to get them to have a nice snooze on the couch while I can present this breaking story to you.
Out. So, he is able to come up with solutions on the fly.
And Heather, just to end with you on a kind of psychological note, how do people in that part of the world feel about the relationship with the Titanic?
Well, the distress call from the Titanic in 1912 came in here to Cape Race in Newfoundland and Labrador, which is on the Avalon Peninsula's south coast. So people do feel connected. And so many people all over the world are just so fascinated by the Titanic, by its lure and legend. And we do have a connection here in this province because we're the closest really point of land in addition. And obviously a strong maritime history here as well, many seafarers in this province. So definitely a connection here for sure.
And David, we've talked a couple of times about your experience with the sunken Russian submarine, the Kursk, back in 2000. I remember that so clearly because I was actually doing work experience on the Times newspaper from university. So just getting my first taste of what journalism was. And I can picture myself standing in that newsroom where Michael Gove, incidentally, was the news editor, and we were all watching the screens. And then we got the bad news that there was going to be no survivors. With the Kursk, was it inevitable that was going to happen and everyone was going to lose their lives? Or were there ways that maybe they could have been saved?
No, it wasn't inevitable. In fact, the Russians had several attempts themselves to try and save them. We felt we could do even better because we had a really modern piece of equipment. But politics got in the way of that rescue effort. There's no politics here, of course. So I would, and I still think there are some simple problems that might have happened that can be got round, or indeed that, if Stockton is on board, he will know how to fix a lot of these things. So it may be that there's hope yet. I certainly would not give up. That's the mantra that we followed with the Kursk. Whilst there's any possibility of survivors, you just don't give up.
And what were the long-term lessons from that rescue mission that will maybe be being applied here right now, other than just don't give up?
Well, I think, don't give up. But I think also, in the case of the Kursk, it was beset by politics. That, as I said, isn't an issue here. But I think the big lesson is that we knew where the Kursk was when we arrived on scene. That was the simplest. That was the most important thing. And actually, it's the first problem that you ever have when you have a submarine in distress. Where is it? And that's the problem here. So maybe the lesson that will be coming out of this is that even submersibles need some mechanism to indicate their position in the worst circumstances. That would make the search and rescue effort so much simpler. But other than that, I'm afraid it's just hard work. It's just keeping going.
And David, Newscast is recorded in the UK, and there's a UK angle this lunchtime where the Prime Minister's official spokesperson has said that the government's standing by to offer any assistance. And actually, the UK is home to NATO's submarine rescue capability. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, yes, this was the system, the UK submarine search and rescue system was what we deployed to the Barents Sea in 2000. And it will have moved on a lot since I was in charge of it back then. It's 20 odd years ago. But there is a very good capability in the UK for using vessels, submersibles, to rescue people from submarines. Whether or not that's even remotely applicable in this case, I couldn't say. I wouldn't have thought so, because the rescue vessel we use is about the size of the submersible that's potentially in distress. So it's not quite the same thing. But we have a lot of expertise in the UK.
And I've just seen the BBC's reporting, speaking to another expert who says that a commercial pipe-laying ship has arrived in the area. What benefit could that bring?
Well, from my understanding, that will have ROVs, remote operated vehicles. And that, if they're deployed using the last known position of the submersible as the datum, and then you do a search pattern based on that. These are the most. If the problem is that the submersible is on the bottom somewhere, lost power, can't communicate, that is probably the best chance of finding them in the next couple of days. But I still think there is equally a possibility they did get to the surface. They are on the surface, and we just haven't found them yet. The Atlantic is a really tough environment to go looking for things, and the weather will be another factor. I don't know what the weather's like, but invariably it's not helpful.
And Simon, just quickly, can you imagine if they are on the surface, they're able to get out of the submersible, or will they still be sealed into it? Because actually the waves there are going to be massive, aren't they?
Well, that's the thing. So they are sealed into the submersible. The waves are quite bad, and the people who I spoke to who were on the submersible said that, you know, that is the moment where you feel particularly seasick as well. You know, is when you're bobbing around on the surface of the ocean. But what happens ordinarily when they're doing this type of activity is the submersible comes to the surface. They're able to communicate with the mother vessel about where they are, and then the submersible slowly is able to make its way towards the mother vessel, but the mother vessel sort of goes much quicker towards it because it's got a much bigger engine. But I was there on the mother vessel looking for this submersible after it had come to the surface, and it is a very, very small thing, in a very, very big ocean. Even when we were right next to it, I couldn't see it. You know, right. People had to point it out to me because only the very top of the submersible floats up there. So, you know, you're just seeing a little kind of shiny thing, really, a little darkness in the ocean. So, you know, I think sonar will probably help, but I think it's quite short range, is my understanding. But if it's just on visuals, it's going to be really hard.
Well, Simon, thank you very much for making us all realise just how tricky this rescue operation is going to prove to be. David, thank you very much for your expertise that you've built up over decades and decades. We really appreciate it. And Heather, thank you for keeping us up to date about the rescue operation, and we'll keep in touch with you over the next few days as this progresses. Thanks, all of you. And that's all for this episode of Newscast. If you would like to listen to any other episodes, we're available every day as a daily podcast on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's it.
I'm Azadeh Mashiri in Washington, and this is BBC World News America.
Now we've got news.
The world's attention right now is focused on a patch of the North Atlantic, roughly the size of Connecticut, and the search for a missing submersible. 5 people are on board, and they were on their way to visit the site of the Titanic. Earlier on Tuesday, US Coast Guard officials said they had roughly 40 hours of oxygen left. Ships and planes are scouring the ocean around 700 kilometres, that's about 435 miles off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada. Officials say an underwater search vessel has been launched. Now, the Titanic, which sank in 1912, lies nearly 4,000 metres beneath the surface. Keep in mind, there is no light at that depth. Now, let's cross to Boston, where Carl Nassman is there for us now. Carl, what's the latest on the search?
Well, this here in Boston is where this search is being coordinated. There's been no signs yet of the vessel or the 5 people on board, but this is becoming an international search effort with the U.S. Navy, the Coast Guard, Canadian officials, even commercial companies and vessels becoming involved. And as you mentioned, the clock is ticking. There's been no signs yet. My colleague Jess Parker has more on that search.
These are the last known photos of the Titan submersible. They were taken on Sunday morning, just before it began its descent. An hour and 45 minutes later, contact was lost. It's a 5-man capsule that people crawl into. This was filmed by the BBC last year. It shows people being bolted in from the outside. The sub then plunges into the ocean's depths. The US Coast Guard has released a fresh estimate of how much oxygen may now be left on board.
First of all, it's an estimate, right? Because we know from the the data we were using as a starting point was 96 hours. We know at this point we're approximately about 41 hours.
Is a deep sea rescue effort realistic, and what would that look like?
I can't tell you exactly what it would look like. I would tell you that, we are out there, we're searching. We wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be searching and putting all effort out there. I think that, if the sub is located, that's a question that then the experts need to look at what is the best course of action.
Those on the vessel are confirmed to be the British billionaire Hamish Harding, British businessman Shahzada Daoud and his son, 19-year-old Suleiman, French
Appreciate
explorer Paul-Henri Narjolet, and this man, Stockton Rush, the chief executive of the expedition company OceanGate.
It's basically a Sony PlayStation-style controller.
Here he is in a 2022 CBS documentary showing how the vessel was operated via a games console, while construction pipes were used for ballast.
This is an experimental sub. People are informed that it's very dangerous down there.
The sub was towed out to sea from Newfoundland before arriving at the wreck site on Sunday. It then began its dive in coordination with a mothership, the Polar Prince. Once a vessel goes below 1,000 metres, it'll be in darkness, no light. Farther down is the Titanic wreck, 3,800 metres under the North Atlantic. The US Coast Guard has told us that they weren't notified about the missing vessel until around 8 hours after that initial loss of contact between the sub and its mothership. Now, a loss in communication has happened on these expeditions before, but never like this or for so long. Mike Reese is one of the few people who've made the trip before. He describes reaching the bottom of the ocean.
When you touch bottom, you don't really know where you are. And again, the compass immediately stopped working and was just spinning around. And so we had to flail around blindly at the bottom of the ocean, knowing the Titanic was somewhere there, but it is so pitch dark.
In the sea's murkiest reaches, this is what people pay nearly £200,000 to see. OceanGate Expeditions says it's getting help from government agencies and deep-sea companies, and it's praying for the crew's safe return.
Oh, you're praying?
Jessica Parker, BBC News in Boston.
What a wasteful idea. What a wasteful
thing. Now, this is an incredibly complex and difficult mission for several reasons. One, we've already mentioned, the size that they are searching is very big, the size of an entire U.S. state. It's also very deep. The location where the Titanic sunk is about 2.5 miles beneath the surface of the ocean.
I want to go back to what Iris said. Was it Iris? No, sorry, it was Adam. Adam, he said, what happens with when there's like 10 minutes left of oxygen? Probably not worth thinking about. Huh? You got 10 minutes left of oxygen. That's 10 long minutes. But at that point, probably there must have been some degradation in the body because of the looming lack of oxygen. I mean, I'm not sure how it works. If there's 10 minutes left of oxygen, is that 10 minutes left of nice pure oxygen, or are they struggling to find some? I don't know how that works. This is tragic.
Hamish Harding. Now, he's actually been to the bottom of the ocean several times. He's actually been into space as well. And there's also a French explorer who is a Titanic fanatic. He knows a lot about this ship. He's visited actually more than anybody else the actual site of the wreckage. So a fairly experienced crew was on board that vessel.
And Carl, we are focused on the search right now, but has there been any other theories or information on what could have possibly happened in the first place?
Well, we don't exactly know. There are some complex ideas about what might have gone wrong because, remember, this is a vessel that was equipped with several ways to resurface in the case of a problem, and that's what has some people quite worried. Why haven't we been able to find this vessel? Why hasn't it potentially resurfaced yet? There are some thoughts that it might be caught in some netting or bits of wreckage from the Titanic itself. There are some theories that maybe it has resurfaced. We haven't found it yet. And then, of course, the worst case scenario could be that there was some sort of damage or crack in the hull of the ship. And if that's the case, that would certainly be the worst case scenario.
Carl, thank you so much for that. Nomia Iqbal is in St. John's in Newfoundland. Nomia, I can see the conditions there. They don't look great. How is that going to affect a search team?
The conditions are really, really terrible at the moment. This is the worst spring since 1943, according to officials. It's
Isn't this
raining.
a repeat
It's
of
incredibly
the news?
foggy, so visibility is really low. You can't, I mean, further out, you really can't see very much. So that is making it harder for the US teams, the Canadian teams, and the private vessels that are trying desperately in this race against time to find the missing submersible. Just to give you a sense of the scale of it again, I am about 400 miles of the coast of the Titanic wreckage, I should say, is about 400 miles of the coast of Newfoundland where we are. And the wreckage is 12,500 feet below the Atlantic Ocean. And the area that they're searching is 70 miles wide. That's about the size of the US state of Connecticut. So the teams are really up against it in trying to find the missing vessel.
And Nomia, what's the reaction been in the community there?
Well, earlier I spoke to the Premier of Newfoundland, Andrew Fury, and he said to me that this province has it almost knows how to deal with maritime tragedies, given its location, given its history, given its relationship to the Titanic as well. Having said that, this is unfathomable. He said this is really hard for people to process. Obviously, you've got, the world's media paying attention to this very small province. He also said to me that as a leader, he feels pretty helpless but not hopeless. And he is in close contact with officials in Canada and the US to do whatever they can to try and locate the missing
What does that
five.
mean, whatever they can?
And Nomia, what are the big logistical challenges that seem to be on his mind as well as the rescue team's mind? I know we've talked about the clock ticking and the weather being difficult there, but there are several issues at play.
Well, I think ultimately the best case scenario they'd hoped for was that this submersible would have managed to bob back up to the surface and it would be somewhere located in the Atlantic Ocean. Still not easy to find, but that would enable the aircraft that's searching over water to potentially try and find it. The worst case scenario is that that's not happened and you've got the US Navy now involved. Presumably they have the ultra underwater deep capabilities to try and find where this vessel is. But just to re-emphasize what I said, that the area is 70 miles wide, the depth of the ocean is almost incomprehensible, and it's a real race against time. Diving experts will tell you that this depth of the ocean that they are trying to get to, that they're trying to explore, is less explored than outer space. That's what the teams are up against.
Nomia, thank you so much. And as you can see, we've got several correspondents on the ground. Please do check our website where all of them are passing on their updates.
Oh boy.
The US Coast Guard says it estimates that the 5 people trapped on board the missing sub only have a day and a half supply of oxygen left.
Exactly.
Ships and aircraft are descending on the remote part of the North Atlantic where the small submersible was last seen. 3 of the people on it are British citizens, including a 19-year-old boy. Contact was lost on Sunday morning as it descended towards the wreck of the Titanic, hundreds of miles from shore.
Sunday morning.
The passengers, who'd paid $250,000 each to go on the trip, left Canada's Newfoundland last Friday on a ship which was carrying the sub. They travelled more than 400 miles to the site of the Titanic wreckage and began their dive down on Sunday morning at around 8 a.m. local time. It was supposed to last
Sunday
no
morning.
more than 8
It's
hours,
now Tuesday
seated in very
afternoon.
cramped conditions. But the sub lost contact with their ship after 1 hour and 45 minutes, and nothing has been heard from them since. The alarm was only raised with the Coast Guard at 5:45 on Sunday afternoon. Well, in a moment, we will hear from our correspondents in Newfoundland and in Boston. But first...
So it left at 8 a.m. to do its dive, 8 a.m. It lost contact in 1 hour and 45 minutes, so that's before 10 o'clock. And they didn't call it in until after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Someone's head's gonna roll.
The sub then plunges into the ocean's depths. The US Coast Guard has released a fresh estimate of how much oxygen may now be left.
This is the third time we've heard this.
First of all, it's an estimate, right? Because we know.
Well, let's see if CBC's got any more for us. Same guy. Let's go to the top stories. U.S. Air Force aircraft land in St. John's with gear to aid in search for missing submersible. Okay, now it's amazing. Like we're looking at minutes and hours here. Let's go now. Where's the live? See, we've seen this guy. His name's Jamie Frederick. So what? Nothing new. Let's listen to this as it happens.
David, at that same news conference, as you may have heard, they talked about the oxygen supply on board. And now, as we go to air, that would be less than 40 hours of oxygen left for these 5 people on board. So if we do the math and you look at the logistics, even if the sub were to be found, is there enough time to get to the crew before their oxygen runs out?
It's tough and it's desperate. I suspect at this point the sub is on the bottom. If it were on the surface, it would have been found. And it's on the bottom and they're not making any noise. So that's going to make it hard to find them.
So when they say, as we heard in that news conference and in that clip, what are they doing right now?
Yeah, so airplanes are searching on the surface. And they're starting with the most probable area, which is nearest to the Titanic. But with time, they expand this big amoeba-shaped area, which accounts for the currents and where they think it might be drifting. Now, we haven't seen it, so that's not good news. And then the second part of the search is underwater. And what they're doing is they're listening for sounds from the submarine. It could be a pinger, or it could be someone banging on the end of the metal hull. Those submarine hunting buoys are not detecting anything. So now we're down to doing a sort of inch by inch scan of the neighborhood using small remotely operated vehicles that are just sort of crawling along looking for it. So that's needle and haystack work.
How much longer do you expect this mission to continue, the search?
I think they'll probably continue the search until the oxygen has run out, plus a little bit of a buffer. I mean, the people on board could extend the oxygen by not doing physical activity, by resting, by napping, by meditating. You wouldn't want to terminate the search too soon. But at some point, even if you find the ship, you got to get it up to the surface. They're bolted in there. We got to get the hatch off and get fresh oxygen to them.
When you say they're bolted in there, it makes our hairs stand on end as we hear that. It adds another terrifying dimension to an already terrifying circumstance that most of us can only imagine. Apart from doing the things that you mentioned that they could be doing to conserve oxygen, are there mechanisms on board or things that they could be doing as individuals to try to alert rescuers?
First off, for some reason, it's not coming back up to the surface. The ship has multiple ways of coming up to the surface. They can use their they have these little sort of guide propellers that they maneuver around with. They would drive up to the surface using them. If they're trapped, for example, let's say they got wedged underneath the propeller because a current dropped them, and so the propeller of the Titanic is bigger than they are, so they get wedged under there, using the thrusters to try and get out. I'm sure they're desperately doing all that. But I'm fearful because we don't hear any noise coming from them, and they certainly would be doing everything they could to indicate their position. So I'm worried that something worse has happened, like they had a leak and it's filled with water.
You're not optimistic about how this will end?
No, I mean, the history shows when submarines are lost, or when we lose communication with the submarine, that we need to prepare ourselves for bad news. I wouldn't lose hope at this point, but I would steel myself.
Yesterday, I spoke with a man on the program, a retired businessman, a Canadian, who, along with his son, they paid the $250,000 to go on this adventure, as he described it. And he talked about the training they received, the professionalism he felt of the team that helped them prepare for this, but did concede that, it was controlled or piloted by essentially an Xbox controller. I wonder if your views about private companies going on these kind of journeys has changed because of this. What do you think this should teach us about this kind of endeavor?
Yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily a private company thing or just a human tendency thing. What we know how hard it is to operate submarines. When I say we submariners, I've been underwater for 87 days in a row, and we have tremendous resources from the government. If I'm going to use an Xbox controller, which I don't really have a problem with that, but I'd have like 3 spares. I think there's a human tendency to overestimate the heroic willpower of humans to overcome the laws of nature. And we feel like, oh, they're great people and they're such superstars and they can do anything. And that's not true. You can be a superstar, you can be a great person, but you can't do anything. And you can't overcome pressure, which is 380 times what atmospheric pressure is. We got to get past this sort of human, a human as hero can overcome the laws of Mother Nature and instincts.
So would you get in this submersible?
No. You're taking on a lot of risk, personal risk, and I'm not sure what the gain is. I don't really have a tremendous fascination with the Titanic. I don't need to go down to a gravesite where 1,500 bodies are interred, and I'll do other things that are maybe risky. I like hiking and things like that, but I try not to go too close to the edge.
David, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm so sorry. My timing really sucks. I went to get some more coffee and the clip ran out. What's NPR got going? Anything? No, I don't want to do that. How do we listen to this thing? Live. And just refresh.
Because it came up before. Oh, there we go.
That really felt validating. People were asking me what the titles imply as far as where the story was going to go, and it's been great just to have people care about these characters that I've loved.
All right, obviously nothing there. Let's go back to the BBC, sorry.
A couple of the people on board.
Yeah, it brings it home personally. That's the difference. This also happens to be my field, search and recovery, but when it's involving with people that you know personally, it's...
I'm just going to refresh to see if they've changed the 40 hours to anything less. Still less than 48 hours. So where's that dude? What was I listening to? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, live. There it is. No, yeah.
Speaking to described the search as like looking for a needle in a haystack.
The area that we search is roughly about the size of Connecticut. As we continue on with the search, we're expanding our capabilities to be able to search under the water as well.
The sub was towed out to sea from Newfoundland before arriving at the wreck site on Sunday. It then began its dive in coordination with a mother ship, the Polar Prince. Once a vessel goes below 1,000 metres, it'll be in darkness, no light.
It seems that we're going to be getting a lot of repeat until something breaks. So I'm sorry, I was going to leave this on here while I do have a bathroom break because I've been drinking coffee all day. I'll be right back.
You know where you are. And again, the compass immediately stopped working and was just spinning around. And so we had to flail around blindly at the bottom of the ocean, knowing that
this is a repeat. But for anyone who's new joining in, this is probably new to you. So I'll just let it run while I do me bathroom break.
Expeditions says it's getting help from government agencies and deep sea companies, and it's praying for the crew's safe return. Jessica Parker, BBC News in Boston.
You're watching a special BBC News live stream with the latest on the search and rescue operation underway for 5 people missing on board a submersible that was on a dive to the wreck of the Titanic off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada. The US Coast Guard gave us this update.
This time I'd like to welcome Captain Jamie Frederick, Response Coordinator in the 1st Coast Guard District.
Good afternoon. I'm Captain Jamie Frederick with the 1st Coast Guard District Response Department, which oversees search and rescue operations under Rear Admiral John Mauger, the 1st Coast Guard District Commander. I'll provide a brief recap of our coordinated search efforts for the 21-foot submersible with 5 people on board, along with providing an update on current search efforts and plans for the next 24 hours. On behalf of all the men and women of the United States Coast Guard and our search partners, we offer our most heartfelt thoughts and prayers for the 5 crew members, their families, and their loved ones. Our crews are working around the clock to ensure that we are doing everything possible to locate the Titan and the 5 crew members. Yesterday, we stood up a unified command consisting of expertise from the United States Coast Guard, the United States Navy, Canadian Armed Forces and Coast Guard, and the Titan's parent company, OceanGate Expedition. This is a complex search effort which requires multiple agencies with subject matter expertise and specialized equipment. While the U.S. Coast Guard has assumed the role of Search and Rescue Mission Coordinator, we do not have all of the necessary expertise and equipment required in a search of this nature. The unified...
Well, I think we're at a point here where nothing's going to happen for a while unless something breaks quickly. But I'm going to end the broadcast right here, and I will continue it. I might, it might start in the middle of the night, I don't know, but I will if anything breaks and I catch it, I will immediately start rebroadcasting it on here. All right. So at this point, it looks like it's just everything's just a repeat. Boom, boom, boom. Nothing else that is worth it. So, see you in a while, and look after yourselves, okay?